So welcome everyone. Welcome to our JResponse Readiness session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leah Garber and I'm Vice President for Israel Engagement at JCC Association and a very, very proud member of the JResponse collaborative team. With me here today is my very dear friend and colleague, Mark Young. Mark is, as you know, the director of JResponse. We also have here a few of our JCC Association colleagues that I do want to acknowledge. I saw Sierra Weiss, Access and Inclusion Specialist for the JCC community. I believe we also have Kathy Palmer, Director of Sheva Center, and Sarah Koffler, Early Childhood Education Specialist. So thank you, our very dear friends and colleagues from the Sheva Center, for joining us as well. We also have today very special presenters that I will introduce further later on, but I just want to acknowledge them. Liza Barron from GCC of Greater Pittsburgh, Malgosha Schlemper from the GCC of Greater Boston, and Steve Maguire from the GCC of Central New Jersey. And we invited our three panelists to share some insights related to readiness for crisis with an early childhood and inclusion lens. But first, please allow me to take one more minute to share with you a little bit about the Readiness Monthly Series as part of our JResponse initiative. So as you all know, readiness is the state of being fully prepared. And this initiative provides JCC professionals the know-how, the tools, and some best practices for positive actions and behaviors to be implemented before, during, and also following any kind of crisis. Series content is built upon the readiness model that is part of the JResponse foundational training program that, Mark, I think we completed 3 or 4 cohorts already, and the winter one is on its way. The readiness model is basically, it amplifies the JResponse READY model, R-E-A-D-Y, standing for relationships, emergency plan, assessment, document, and your teams. Today, we asked 3 experts from within the JCC movement to share the very critical knowledge, the tools, tips, and some best practices for both preparing for and responding to crisis or disaster within the early childhood space and within an inclusion mindset. When dealing with crises of any kind, I believe we all recognize that early childhood and inclusion teams are at the forefront of dealing with sensitive populations that require communication and behavior skills beyond the sensitivity that is required when dealing with people from other categories in any emergency situation. So we hope that today's session will offer you all appropriate communicational and behavioral models for, and hopefully never, but if dealing with these groups, and maybe some do's and don'ts in relationship to responding to crisis and when dealing with sensitive groups. So with that, I'm extremely excited to further introduce our great speakers. Liza Barron, my dear friend from Pittsburgh, is the Director of Early Childhood Development at the GCC of Greater Pittsburgh. Liza celebrated 21 years at the GCC in October, and she's now in her 8th year of leading the Early Childhood Development Center. In her role, she has the privilege of learning alongside so many wonderful and inspiring educators, Jewish communal professionals, and parents, thinking together about the profession of early childhood and the ways in which we are teaching and nurturing young children. Steve Maguire is the Director of Operations at the GCC of Central New Jersey. Steve has been with the GCC of Central New Jersey since 2013, starting out as the Transportation Director for Camp Yachad. When opportunity knocked, Steve took over the role of the Director of After-School Services, serving the GCC's early childhood population, as well as children from local public schools. In 2018, Steve shifted his focus from programming to operations to become the Director of Youth Operations, overseeing early childhood, after school, and camp operations. In April of 21, Steve became the JCC's Director of Operations. And last but not least, Malgosha Schlempo is co-director of the Godin Early Learning Center at the JCC of Greater Boston. She has been working with children and families for more than 30 years in a variety of settings, including clinical, residential, and educational settings. Malgosha's passion for working with young children is rooted in her deep belief of their capabilities. Malgosha is instrumental in creating an environment where relationships are built in trust and communication, where children and teachers are engaged and challenged, and where families feel confident about their children's care and safety. Liza, Steve, and Malgosha, reading your bios makes me feel like I want to start all over again and send my kids to all of your centers with such amazing educators. So thank you for being here. Thank you in advance for presenting. And I want to ask all of you to keep, we'll obviously leave some time towards the end for your questions. I see that we have many people on today, which is beautiful. And as Mark mentioned earlier, I'm in Israel, so I don't know if you could see through my window, but it's 9 p.m. Israel time. But for you guys, it's midday. Your centers, your early childhood centers are operating, and still you're here with us. So we greatly appreciate that, and thank you. I invite you to either post your questions in the chat box or save them on for later when you could unmute yourself. And I also want to say that this may be sort of like a crash course because there's so much to talk about, and we may not be able to cover everything, which is okay. Our presenters will keep their answers very brief, and then when we open it up to questions, they can maybe elaborate a little more and address your questions. So we'll start with me sharing some questions to our speakers. And I want to start with you, Liza. How has your department in Pittsburgh connected with other GCC departments, supported your capacity for readiness? And reminding all of you that unfortunately the community in Pittsburgh in October 27, 3 years ago, has experienced the most terrible shooting in the history of the United States, the anti-Semitic shooting in the history of the United States. So I think you know a thing or two about readiness, Liza.
Thank you, Leah. I think that I would say that our connectedness to other JCC departments has been critical for so many reasons and on so many different occasions, some of the harder ones and of course the really good ones too. But when I think about readiness and when I think about support to children, to educators, I think about our connection with everybody else who works at the JCC. We really operate, sometimes we feel like we're operating on an island, in our own secure protected wing. We can't leave the building to go do some of the things we might like to do in the middle of the day, like many of our other coworkers at the JCC. And so focusing on building those relationships has been really critical, I think, to the growth just in our early childhood development center. And one of the ways I think that that's happened, and this was pre-1027, this was pre-pandemic, but engaging with other departments, specifically here at the JCC in Pittsburgh with our senior leadership team, in supporting some of the things that we do in early childhood, and ensuring that that group has what they need in their files in order to give a bathroom break or fill in for a short period of time in a classroom if needed. It's an organic way that other people at the JCC have been able to get to know some of the doings here inside our department that I think set them up for more success when we actually need them to do things that help us, whether it's with a planned fire drill or something, not so easy. So I think connecting with our peers here has been so important, and we're always thinking about other ways to do that too.
It's so interesting, Liza, because we actually had a session, one of our readiness session was entirely focusing on the pre-event relationship that are fostered and the bonds that are billed that we could utilize in the event of. So this is right on target, and I know that we have the recording somewhere. I just want to acknowledge one other JCCO Association team member. I want to make sure that we welcome Mackenzie Adams, Assistant Director of the Sheva Center. Thank you, Mackenzie, for joining us here today. Malgosha, I want to address this next question to you. How can JCC staff be most helpful during an emergency event? And when I'm asking about staff, this is obviously staff that on a daily basis are not dealing with early childhood centers. You're muted, Malgosha. You need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for having me here today. I am not a public speaker. I usually don't do this kind of things. I usually have just a lot of intimate conversations with the parents, teachers, and of course, children. But since this topic is very important, because we definitely can use help from during the emergency from all of you, and I appreciate that you brought it to the staff of the JCC. And to start, I really feel that it's very important to understand the requirement of our work with young children. It's a little bit different than just like working at the computer, you know, or like with the adults, colleagues. It is really important to be present and engaged. The children really need to know that we are interested with them. We want to spend time with them. Playing is the best way to get the children to know, and also letting them to get to know us. When we talk with the children or play with the children, we really need to reflect their voices back to them. Practice active listening and restating what they are seeing or saying back to them. It's crucial. This lets children know they are heard and their voice matter. It also really helps develop connections between the adults and the children. Building the relationship is the most important job that we are doing every single day. And the other thing is to respect the children. Make sure to ask them before holding their hand or picking them up. It is critical to acknowledge their feelings and to respond to their emotions. Let the children know that it's okay to be sad or scared or unsettled. So when the child falls, we are there and has big emotions, you don't say, you are okay. You don't have to cry. You are okay. You say, you ask, are you okay? And then acknowledge the feelings. I think you are, that was really a big fall. You are really scared. Was that scary? And then this way, you really process the emotions with the kids and helping them to stand back on their feet. When you are helping the teachers, ask teachers what you can do to be the most helpful. Stick close to the teachers, to the group that you are with or have children from, so the teacher doesn't have to look for the kid or be worried. And support teachers by being an added set of eyes and hands, and always follow the lead of the teacher.
I love the added set of eyes, and basically what you're saying, ask what they need. Thank you. We'll get back to you later. Steve, so now that we've learned a little bit more, could you maybe be practical and share with us 3 best practices when it comes to preparing for an emergency in an early childhood environment?
Sure. So the first practice is actually to practice. When we do drills here, we have to do monthly drills. I'm sure many of you have via licensing have requirements. We have to do a monthly fire drill. We have to do 2 lockdown drills. Before our first fire drill and before our first lockdown drill, we actually let our teachers know to the week, sometimes the day, that there is going to be one. So expect one. So we urge our teachers to actually practice with their kids through the whole drill. So line them up and do the procedures that they would do and teach their children. So it's not such a shock, and the kids kind of know and are prepared for the drill that is coming up. The next thing that I recommend is during your first drill or during any of your drills is to observe. Observe the children that are having the hardest time. Observe your children and how they react, and actually spend some time with them to talk with them about the drill, either one-on-one, or if you have an age group that is that you can do this with, is actually your morning meeting the next day or later in the day. Discuss with them about the drill. What made them scared? What made them nervous? And helps them to kind of figure things out on their own, and work with them so the next time there's a drill, there hopefully will be a less, the children will be less freaked out, actually, is the best word I can come to right now. And the final thing is know your audience, be preparedness. Have things in your classroom for your children. One of the examples that we have is for lockdown drills. We actually have lollipops in our to-go bags. So it helps keep the kids occupied and keeps them calm while you can complete the drill or go through the emergency.
So this is great. And when you're saying that you're letting your teachers know in advance that a drill is taking place, do you also share that information with parents in advance?
Sometimes we have, but on a regular basis, no, we do not.
Okay, just
we
they
will,
may or may.
we usually then communicate after we've had a drill
Okay.
that a drill did take place.
That was my next question. Thank you. Liza, next question is to you. Is your early learning center connected with other centers, likewise centers across the city? And do you have shared emergency preparedness protocols or guidelines that you follow as a community?
Yes, so we are connected with 8 other Jewish early learning centers in the greater Pittsburgh area. So in addition to sort of building those relationships and connecting monthly just in discussion about a variety of things, we're also connected by a common security system. Something that was on the table for a long time but didn't come to be until after 1027 was the decision that the Federation made. So this is thanks to the support from the Jewish Federation here, that this service could be funded for all of the schools. So it's the installation of a system where if there's an emergent situation happening in one of the early learning centers, there's a notification to all of us. And this is, I think, theoretically, this is a really great idea and it's a really great system, and we're learning how to use it. And just recently we had a situation at another early learning center where an alarm was hit by accident. And it actually ended up being a really great thing because it gave us an opportunity to really learn where some kinks were in that system during a time that wasn't actually a true crisis. So that we could think about the communication that is necessary, when an event like that happens. But that's been something I think that's brought us all together and helped us to think together about our protocols and to run protocols by one another, and to talk about different events like that when they happen.
And did you update your protocols or your procedures based on what you learned from the other 7 organizations?
So we update our protocols annually, and we were required this year to update them by the state of Pennsylvania a bit further to include inclusion practices and some other important things. And so I think often I learn something from how somebody else is doing something. And the centers are all different. Some of them are part of larger school age programs. Some of them are completely standalone, so, in synagogues. And so I think we take what works, for us.
For sure. Thank you. So I want to address the next question to you, Steve. You mentioned the drills and how the drills are important. For the kids, I'm assuming, I'm no expert, but I believe that for kids, drill, no drill, it's still frightening. They don't know that the drill is only a drill. I mean, you could say it's only a drill, but it's still, there's this notion and noise and rushness. How do you deal with kids with special needs when you need to walk them through the drill and make sure that they're functioning?
So I think the best advice when it comes to children with special needs and helping them through something like this is, first and foremost, if you can, and if you are able and you have this individual in your classroom or within your JCC, is actually let them that have the training assist with the children more so than anyone else. Have this actually worked out prior to doing a drill, beginning of the school year. They know a lot more, and we gain knowledge as we go throughout the year, but I think most important is to allow them to assist with the child that has special needs, and you deal with the other children within your classroom to the best of your ability, I think is the best way to go do it. But I also urge that those of you that have a child with special needs within your classrooms, as I'm sure most of you do, is learn, absorb. Osmosis works great in those environments to learn about that child and their needs, because there may come a time that that individual may not be around and you may be called upon to assist.
And basically every day is a drill for people that have special. Thank you, Steve. So Malgosha, you talked earlier about the way that you address kids. You don't presume that you know better, that you acknowledge their feelings. Could you talk us a little bit about how do you communicate with young children when there is an event of crisis, or when there is a drill and you're trying to act as if this is an event? What is the language that you use that, something is going on? You can't say, don't worry about it, everything is okay, when clearly everything is not okay. What are the special tips here? You're muted again, Malgosha.
So,
Okay, thank you.
okay. Yeah, definitely. We're using, our system is using the walkie-talkie. So the whole building, we have around 160 children, 15 classrooms through the building. We're on the 2 floors. So we do communicate with the teachers through walkie-talkie, but the announcement for it goes through the PTA system. So anyway, so we're all getting the message at the same time, and then we tell the children, they hear that too, they definitely don't pay attention to it. And we just saying, please line up, we have to leave the building. There is a special system of helping with the infants and with the really young toddlers. We do practice these drills through the drills, leaving the buildings or also sheltering in place. So our children are kind of familiar, especially the older ones, with those procedures. Like there are special places, hiding places in the classrooms. Teachers do need to lock the doors from the inside. We do practice it because that normalize for the children this kind of activity when it's really happening. And we do tell them while we're doing the drills, that those things are not happening very often. Like with the fire drill, which we have really every month, you just said fire doesn't really happen that often, but we do need to know what to do when to be safe and where to go and where to meet. And they kind of like, yeah, they are, some of them are scared, even the 5 years old, they go and cover their ears and they, but it's kind of normal for them. So when we started to do the lockdown drills, they are not very often. They are mostly for the teachers who will learn how to proceed in those emergencies. But the children obviously understand that they have to be quiet. Yes, we do have special bags. We have lollipops and all, which children really like, of course. And this does help them keep quiet. But the biggest role is when we are in those hiding spots, which are usually bathrooms or closets that they are prepared to spend time with the kids. And we never know how long this is gonna last. We do make sure that the children know we are there for them. We're gonna be here with them. We are in the contact with people from the outside, if the children, and but we also making sure that we answer only the questions that the children are, I mean, answering the questions the children ask. We never give them any more information that they are ready for, and they show us that they are ready for because they're asking about it. So we really keep it very simple. And when they say, why is this happening? We never really focus on why. We really focus more about what are we doing? And we're always very honest with the kids. We say, we don't know. Like I would say, for example, sometimes people make bad decisions, or I don't know, I don't understand all the things that other people do. And you just like, you know, let them know that you don't know either, but I'm here with you. We keep you safe. We're gonna make sure we are in that everything is gonna be okay. And obviously you're telling them when you are in this closet or in the bathroom or under the table, depends, each classroom has those spots. Which happened to us once already. We did have to shelter in place. It went really very well. It went really very well. I'm not saying it was, I wasn't in the classrooms, I was out in the hallways and checking the rooms, and obviously if they were locked, if they are really the people who are inside there are safe. And you have to also deal with the aftermath. So this is another problem, because like when you are in this, and this is the bigger picture, because the teachers and the parents and the children need help to process their thoughts about what happened. And we have this developmental specialist who helps and leads this process and helps us with that. But it's very, very important to have the system in place and be prepared. The communication is going through the update of the it's ongoing throughout the whole emergency event, but it does not end when the emergency ends.
Right, for sure.
It's still going, and again, it's, you know, sometimes the children need even more the help beyond the thing that we can offer them within our schools. Didn't happen the last time, which is great. But to be honest with the kids, to be straight, to be careful what we're saying and not to share too much and admit when we don't know
Right.
why
Thank you.
or what. It's a
Oh gosh, I'm sure that trauma could arouse in the aftermath, and kids could seem very calm during, but then maybe in a day or two, often trauma arouses. So thank you. So with this, I'm opening this to our questions from the viewers, and the first question is coming to us from the Hartford JCC. Steve, Jim is asking, how do you enroll staff and parents into accepting the value of live drills, especially lockdown ones?
Can you give me that question one more time?
Yes. Jim from Hartford is asking, how do you enroll staff and parents into accepting the value, the importance of live drills, especially the live drills that are about lockdowns?
I got to be honest with you. We do it because we have to. There's really not there is no if, and, or but about it. I think the thing with our JCC is it's required by licensing. So that's kind of the way we the conversation that we have with parents, especially. I think my hardest topic I have is when I have teachers that aren't happy with the time that we do a drill. I get people like, well, it's nap time. Well, of course it's nap time, but a fire doesn't choose not to start when kids are, they're napping, I'll wait till later. We go by the stance that our licensing requires it. So there is no question that we do it. And that's generally placates an upset parent. And we kind of have the same conversation, like, we have to do it at different times to get the children, and I hate using this word, but used to it. They have to get used to it to make it hopefully less traumatizing the next time that it happens or there's actually a real emergency.
And did you get any pushback? You're muted, Steve.
Darn it. I will say, typically when we explain that it is required by licensing,
Right,
the pushback stops.
right. Yeah, that's always good. Great. Mark, do we have any other questions in your chat, or people are welcome now to unmute themselves and ask questions directly?
Yeah.
Okay. We have a question here. Who do you work with to engage children after an event?
Specifically around navigating their trauma, kind of the navigating, as Nagosha was talking about, the social and emotional parts.
Malgosia, did you get that?
Yeah, of course. As I was saying,
Malgosia, could I just ask you to please keep your answers short so we could we have time for other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, we have developmental specialist who leads this process with the parents and the children. She goes to the classroom, she talks with the kids. She has also she does the play therapy in her offices, and definitely she can give the directions for the parents or children who need more help or deeper help.
Great, thank you. We have another question here. How do you conduct your lockdown drills? Business as usual, with the doors just being locked, or the kids, the students and teachers take specific actions? Steve, Liza, any of you want to take this?
We do it like it's the real thing. 100%.
Okay.
There are no cutting in corners. It is like it is the real thing. We explain to our teachers in training and throughout the year how to do it. We go so far as to say to them, like, and I generally conduct the drills with our facilities director, and those of our safety and security committee actually participate. Sometimes we have the local police. We actually tell them, if I come to your door without the drill being over and try to get in or ask you to let me in, don't let me in. we don't cut corners with our drills.
Okay, so it's like a drill. Business is never as usual. Thank you. So to that end, Liza, there's another question from Betsy from San Antonio. She's asking, Steve talked earlier about parents wanting, pick the best time of the day for the drill so it's most convenient. Obviously, that can be done. So Betsy is asking, did you ever practice a drill when kids were outside in the playground or the fields? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
that's something that you tested.
We've had drills at all different times. We're also reluctant to have them at, nap time and things that times that, too many teachers called off. I mean, but we always remind ourselves, of course, that crisis can occur at any point in time. But we, because there's just so much going on here, we find that there's no right time to do it. And when we do it, people are often off-site, whether it's on our playground or at our site in Squirrel Hill. They might be on a walk in the community. At our site in the South Hills, there's a great big backyard there. So lots of times people are coming from a variety of directions or not even here when the drill happens.
And there are those false alarms, especially fire alarms, that we are, like swimming in the pool, indoor pool, having the lessons, like the kids are all over. And those are very useful too, because then there is a real practice without.
That's for sure, right. So, you mentioned, Liza, that, kids could be out in, the street. Knowing Pittsburgh very well, I'm trying to picture that. And it seems to me, wow. Are you using other staff, not from the Early Childhood Center, to help you gather them all in, or is that all managed by your team?
So we have, if people are out like in the community walking, then what we're doing is having typically somebody in our security team is aware. We're always aware of who's in the building, who's outside on site, and who's, in the walk, let's say in the community. But somebody from our security team will watch to see who might be coming back to the building when we're in the middle of doing a fire drill or something. We really do rely on other JCC department members to support as well. And so something that we have sort of set up is people who are in other departments are assigned to specific classrooms in the early childhood wing, so that there are some people who know sort of where to go when they hear that alarm. And similarly to what Malgosia and Steve were both talking about, they're really good at deferring to the educators, to the experts. And we know that we need to put children first in those situations. And in order to put children first, we need to take care of our educators and think about what they need in those moments. It can be scary for them. And so other JCC staff, deferring to them, how can I be helpful? And knowing the rules around, when we're taking infants outside, you can't take a baby because they're really cute and walk away from the whole group. There are protocols for a reason. And so everybody that works here at our JCC is really good about deferring to those inside the department.
That's great. I have a very, this question is coming from Detroit, from Shannon, and this is about COVID related. Shannon is saying that due to COVID, their JCC in Detroit has less early childhood staff that is reporting to the building. She's asking if this has been any of your experience, and has it shifted or impacted your practices and who you rely on?
I meant to put less non-ECE staff. So your people that you do rely on, Liza, like you just kind of suggested, and how that's shifted things for you, if at all.
Thank you, Shannon, for clarifying. Any of you? Yeah.
Hi, Shannon. We have the majority of the staff at the JCC are in the building now. It was definitely different. Last year, there were fewer people on site. But it's sort of back to mostly normal in terms of who else is in the building now. But I think that based on, we're also a little bit smaller than we were pre-pandemic in terms of the number of our classrooms and number of children in the classrooms. So there hasn't been a negative impact on us because of that.
Great. Anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question directly, they can. But I know that Kathy Palmer, the one and only, wants to comment on that. So Kathy, this is all yours.
The one and only. First of all, I am just so honored by this opportunity to learn from you all and to, oh, and there I am on the Jumbotron now. Hello, everyone. I have to tell you that you all who are doing this work every single day and making these things possible, even while, even during these COVID times and other times, it's blowing my mind that you are as thoughtful, as careful, as intentional with every step along the way. And I just wanted to jump in to tag on to Shannon's question, because I think that I want the world to understand, and I do see on this call that most of us are out there in ECE land. This is under incredibly horrible coverage situations. I think that when we talk about different departments and readiness, there are just two things I want to say. There are many things I want to say about early childhood, but two things right now. One is this is under the worst circumstances ever as far as coverage and having enough people to make this thing go well. It is unbelievable to me that we are still needing to add on to our job descriptions, things such as being ready for security while we're doing it on a lick and a prayer half the time and with very little value and very little pay and all of those things. And I want to say that goes without saying because we've been saying it ad nauseum, but I never want to stop saying it and shouting from the rooftops that everything you all are saying, Malgosha, Liza, Steve, everything you're saying about how we must listen to the child, how we must listen to the teacher, this has to do with valuing what's happening in that department and not just getting yet another department out of the school or out of the place when there's an emergency. The second piece that I think I really want to dive into and make sure people are hearing is this whole idea of readiness in this day and age. You know, it used to be that you would all go around the flagpole, right? The fire drill would happen. We all meet around the flagpole. It like nobody had to think. Everybody was on rote. Even if you were scared, you just kept doing the same things. And now, because every situation is different, there is thought required at every step. And although that means that the level of difficulty has now gone up because we can't go back to the let's just always do it the same way. What this also means in early childhood is that our philosophy of honoring what children are thinking and wondering about and what teachers are wondering and thinking about and letting them take the lead, that means it's triply important to follow their lead. That means that this is a place where those voices need to rule. And so those details that all three of you are giving, to listen, to watch, to observe, to pay attention, and to follow those folks who deal with this every day, it's going to actually elevate the place of child and teacher and family member in every one of these scenarios, because you're watching the experts with the lived experience and not just trying to follow a protocol by rote. So I just cannot say enough how honored we are to be learning from you all today. I know you do this. I know all of you do this every day and you lead within your agencies, but I really do believe we must speak up for early childhood being a very different kind of department than the others in our J's. And we need to do some teaching of the other folks who might even know the protocols more. And Steve, it's why you're so interestingly positioned, because you know so much about early childhood, even though the direction when we first met about how you're coming in here was from this protocol place. You knew it had to happen with the image of the child, with the image of the learner. And that is why your voice is so valuable, added to these incredible professionals that I've learned so much from in the early childhood world, Malgosha and Liza. So I just want to thank you all for doing this extraordinary emergency work in the most extraordinary of circumstances, and knowing that you're doing it while never compromising on these values that we're trying to lead first with. So I just felt like I wanted to take my hat off to you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you. Another question, how do you engage your parents? And this question is twofold. First of all, if you have any parents that are experts in the field, therapists, psychologists, physicians, are you engaging them in the process of thinking with them? And also, are you taking back feedback coming from parents in the aftermath of drills, reporting back of, I don't know, bad dreams at night or etc.? Is this something that you are considering and sharing with your teams to say, okay, what have we learned here?
Not really. We do not engage with the parents. I mean, there is a lot of thinking before anything happens, but when something like planning and they are informed and the protocols are kind of known to them, not without the specifics. But when the emergency event happens, we really do not engage the parents in processing this with the children or with the teachers. It's strictly professional relationship then. There is a lot of meetings, Zoom meetings now, and of course they make the decisions with our senior leadership about extra maybe security or this kind of things, but they are not involved with any children or teachers professionally, even if they are doctors, therapists.
Thank you. Thank you. Liza, Steve, same answer, different?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have shared information with families after things have occurred. I don't think we always welcome conversation. I mean, my experience, when I think about 1027 as a really big example of that, we did a ton of processing and had a lot of opportunities for families to connect here, but it wasn't something that happened inside of our school. So that's a little different in that regard. But I would say the same as Malgosia, that we haven't asked families for feedback on those protocols or those events.
I'm going to come from it at a different angle. We, part of our safety and security committee, thankfully and lucky for us, we have a good number of parents that actually do security for their job. We have a couple of individuals from Homeland Security and such. So they've given us really good insight and ideas and processes that come from that world to build into our safety and security into any of our drills. We do communicate out to our parents via our parent handbook at the beginning of the year that to expect that we are doing these drills, that we are expected to do that we do them on a monthly basis. I'm sure we've gotten feedback from parents regarding their children after a drill, and that has been communicated through the director to the teacher and then utilized into future language when we communicate out.
This is so important. I have to share, being Israeli, in Israel, within early childhood systems, parents are extremely involved. They share through WhatsApp groups, during, after, before. They're very vocal, very opinionated. So I was just curious to see if that's similar by you, and clearly less. So thank you for that. We have time for Steve, Malgosia, and Liza. Two last minutes for you, just for something final that you want to share before we close this. So anything that you would like to wrap up that people could leave with? And we'll start with you, Malgosia, since you're unmuted.
Okay. If you know you are someone who is going to want to help during an emergency, please make yourself known to the teachers and children. Begin to build the relationships with teachers and children right now, so that during an emergency, you are not going to be a stranger. And there is a lot of ways of doing it. Please contact the director of the school, and you can come and visit for Shabbat or Hanukkah celebrations or any other celebrations that they host, or just be on the playground or play with the kids or share your talent and do some great activities with the kids or some fun games or plays.
Amazing. I think this is really important. Open invitation for people, but we need to know in advance, so no surprises. I think that's very systematic with your message all along. Thank you. Steve, you're up next. Final thoughts.
I say the biggest thing that I say, especially for those of you that do surprise drills like we do, is just, and it's tough because it's a surprise, but stay calm. Stay calm, because if you're calm, the kids are going to stay calm. And whether it's a drill or an emergency, when you have the time, obviously, to be able to focus with your children, is have something with you that you can use with your kids. So a lot of our classes work on projects, whether it's about plants or rockets or something. If you have the mindset to do that, have that with you so you can keep your kids focused, especially when it is an emergency, to keep them calm, keep yourself calm while you're waiting for instructions or just waiting for the drill to be over, is occupy your kids with that. Have them discuss and talk with that with you in regards to something that you're working on to keep their mind off of it. But definitely stay calm.
I think that's an important suggestion for life. Thank you, Steve. It's, I have a minute to share. The Israeli 8 o'clock news just ended reporting that there was an attempt to kidnap a young teenager down south in Israel. And he was calling his mother and she was giving him direction until the police came. And we heard the recording and she was so calm to the point that it sounded not real. And then when she, her last sentence was, "I'm hysterical." And then she said, and she was so calm. And I think that, the message that we all heard over the news is you could still deal with something and portray your calmness, because I think that that's the best thing that people could hear in time of crisis, how the other side is functioning, but not losing it. So thank you, Steve. Liza, last but not least.
I think I just would add to what Malgosia was saying around building those relationships and being connected to other folks at the JCC and having the conversations, like the conversation we're having now, and the conversation that Steve and Malgosia and I got to have a few weeks ago when Leah, you invited us to do this. You can learn from anybody at any time. And I learned from Steve that you can put lollipops in bags for children. And it isn't that I didn't know that children like lollipops, but it didn't occur to me to use those for something like this. And so I think having the conversations are really important, even though they can be really difficult.
Amazing. And basically what you're saying here, that in the prep for this session, you learned something, hopefully in the last 53 minutes. The other 53 listeners on the call today learn something. And I think that the learning goes beyond the hour that we spent here today. You know who to reach and when to reach and why to reach. So let's just utilize the human capacity that we have here. That's our biggest asset here. So thank you very much, Malgosia and Liza and Steve, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your experience, for sharing your knowledge and your best practices. Thank you, Kathy, for adding your always bright perspective and beautiful smiles. And thank you all of you for joining. Really important for us now to hand this over to Mark because he has some really important and exciting announcements.
Good afternoon, everybody, or almost afternoon. My heart is so full by the conversation that we had today because it was so practical and it was so rich. And not only as someone who gets to run JResponse, but I'm also the parent of 2 kids that have gone through JCC ECE. And to know that folks working in early childhood and inclusion, whether it's in ECE or outside of ECE, take the work of readiness so seriously and we're sharing with each other, it just makes my heart so full because we know that our community is in such wonderful hands and we're such in good, wonderful hands with each other. I too want to thank Steve. I'm going to thank you and then take you off spotlight as I thank you. I want to thank Steve. I want to thank Liza. I want to thank Malgosia so much for sharing your wisdom. And of course, I want to thank my partner in crime in this Readiness series and part of our JResponse team, Leah, as well. Just bear with me for a couple of extra minutes to share with you that part of JResponse, Readiness is just 1/4 of it. It's readiness, relief, recovery, and resilience. And though this session was on readiness, specifically with a lens towards early childhood and inclusion, there's a little bit of every R and every other R. So when I heard that we speak to the child in a way that comforts them and just says, I'm here for you. That's very much the work of relief and almost, a version of mental health first aid that we talk about in relief. When we talk about doing these drills again and again so it feels normal, it allows everyone involved to absorb the adversity of an actual crisis, which is all about resilience building, and to set up relationships so far after the emergency event. We have people in place, I believe Malgosia said this, that can help people with the long-term after effects of a crisis or an emergency. That's recovery as well. So thank you to the panel for not only engaging us in readiness, but in all 4 of the R's of JResponse. And as Leah, you so wonderfully quote the Jewish text in many of our readiness sessions. I'm not going to get the Hebrew right, so I'm not going to try. That we have to cook for Shabbat and we have to prepare Shabbat before Shabbat happens, so we have food to eat during Shabbat. We do this work so when the crisis happens, hopefully it never does, that we are prepared and that we mitigate damage and that we come out on the other side better than if we didn't prepare. So thank you all for joining us. Deep gratitude not only to Leah and to the JResponse team, but to Kathy, Mackenzie, Sierra, Jacob, and Sarah, and everyone in the Sheva and Early Childhood Center, Sheva and Inclusion part of JCC Association. This was truly a team effort as well. So deep gratitude. For those of you, this was engaged to folks that are J responders that may not be in ECE or inclusion, and to folks that are in ECE inclusion but may not be J responders. For those of you who are J responders and not necessarily in ECE inclusion, I hope this was a helpful session to understand how you can be helpful and you can have a special lens in the such important part of early childhood and inclusion within our JCCs, even if you're not involved. And I loved what I think all of the panelists said in different ways. Don't be a stranger to early childhood. Get to know them, have the relationship with them so you can help in the JResponse efforts with them, not as a stranger, but as a friend, as a colleague. It reminded me when I worked at the 92nd Street Y a long time ago, and I would play shofar for the kids in 92nd Street Y preschool. I was developing a relationship with them, even though I wasn't in them. That kind of reminded me of it. So develop those relationships intra to the JCC, I think is so important. And for those that are ECE and inclusion, but not necessarily JResponse, hope this excited you to learn more about JResponse and the work that we do training our JCC professionals to respond to crisis and disaster, whether we might deploy you to another JCC that's in crisis, or more centrally and more daily, apply these skills to the work of our JCCs, whether the big crises or the daily crises that happen at JCCs, to help prepare and to take care of yourself and to make sure that you are in great place so you can then help someone else as well. We have another cohort of our Hineni JResponse foundational training occurring in January and February. We haven't promoted it yet, but it will be happening January and February. You'll see emails about that. We have held 3 of these sessions just in 2021, have trained now a total of 150 plus JResponders at about 78 of our JCCs, hoping to get to all of our JCCs very soon. As Leah referred to, this is a monthly readiness session, and whether you attend every single one or just just one overall, we're going to have another one next month. I'm having difficulty putting it in the chat, of course, but if you want to just scribble down, December 13th at 12:30 in the afternoon, Eastern Time, we're going to have a special session facilitated by Dr. Ishai Dror, who's a crisis management and security specialist and lecturer from Ra'anana, Israel. This is coming to us from the J-Ready program of the Jewish Agency for Israel. It's crisis management and decision making. We're going to be simulating crises or talking through them like a tabletop exercise, and then going to reflect on it together. It's going to be a very interactive, it's actually going to be a 90-minute interactive workshop to navigate responding to crisis in real time, pretend obviously a tabletop exercise over Zoom. We hope you can join us. It's open to JResponders to advance your training and also open to all JCC professionals who want to get involved. So I'll send that in the post email and you'll see it in JResponse listserv and probably on the pros brief as well coming up next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Leah, unless you want more, I can say everyone, a happy Thanksgiving, beginning a happy Hanukkah if you're celebrating, happy to the holiday season, and thank you for joining us for this important session. And again, thank you to Steve, Malgosia, Liza, and Leah. Take care.